Hey, Royal Priesthood. Let's have a conversation about the Bishop Keith McQueen interview on the We Need to Talk podcast. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that intro.
What's up, my Royal Priesthood? It's your girl, Priestess.
Another day, another conversation with yours truly. I hope that you are well. And by now, I know you've seen the viral interview with the now non-affirming Bishop Keith McQueen on the We Need to Talk podcast. I wanted to do this on Friday and on Monday, but due to situations beyond my control, because I'm dealing with a lot personally as well, I held off on doing this video because I wanted to gather my thoughts and make sure that I could clearly pace this thing in a way as to not cause harm and to bash anybody. But I am going to give my unadulterated thoughts. Now, let me preface this by saying I witnessed Bishop McQueen's ministry via social media. I remember when he had started pastoring and seeing him come through the ranks, making his way up to bishop and starting a big, powerful ministry with his church ministry and his fellowship. And it felt good to see, and this is while I was in ministry, it felt good to see someone affirm people like me, to affirm the queer community, to affirm the trans community, because not only am I trans, but I'm a queer woman, you know. And it felt good to hear that. But then now seeing all of a sudden his theology changed, it hurt a bit. It felt like a betrayal, not only just for me as someone who's been in the church, but for someone who's thinking about his leaders, his members, those who are connected to him, his colleagues, people that he has inspired to walk in their truth. I begin to hurt for them as well because it's like this is a shock. And I'm going to go ahead and dwell into the interview. Now, jumping into the interview after the introduction and all of that good stuff, Keith McQueen is sitting there, and the host lets it be known that Keith McQueen wrote into him. And he says, "You wrote into me, and I had to vet you before I had you on the show." And my first question was, why in the world did you do this with this particular platform? Someone that you know is conservative, because I've seen highlights from the We Need to Talk podcast, and that's not my cup of tea. I'm not bashing. That's just not. I'm not their target audience, thankfully. But I had questions why this particular podcast, why not do this on your own forum, right? And he doesn't really give an answer when he talked about this with Dr. Will Horn, and this made me question his motive even further. I wonder, since he was married and he has talked about his divorce, I wonder if he really sat down and first talked to his spouse, then talked to his members, his colleagues, and I wonder if he sat down with a licensed professional therapist or a psychologist to help him navigate this, because I really feel like when you're changing theologies and deconstructing in religion, you need not only support from your community and resources to help you deconstruct from that theology, but I feel that you need, not even feel, it is recommended that you speak with a licensed professional that can help you safely and effectively navigate this particular period of your life, because you don't want to cause harm to people in the wake of this. And the way he went about this and seeing the response and backlash, he really didn't give time to talk about this, because anytime that you shift your theologies, it does not happen overnight. You just don't wake up and decide you're going to change your theology. It is a process that happens gradually over time. Now, in the interview, he stated that this started happening around 2022. And at that point, we are coming off of the heels of COVID. And for a lot of ministries and churches, they struggled because we had to shut down, people weren't able to give. And also, we had people passing on, going to glory and becoming ancestors. And people are dealing with the effects of long COVID now. And also, the economy never really recovered. So it's making me wonder, is this him attempting to take the ministry to a higher depth and get more acclaim and build bigger by going to conservative talking points and making himself attractive to conservative leaders? This is what is making me wondering. And as he goes on, he goes through his uh, childhood and he talks about being raised in the church and how he preached his first sermon at 9 and how the gifts were praised in the church and how, when they saw something effeminate in him, they tried to pray it out, and I bet you they beat it out, of course. And he talks about suffering from abuse from his father and how it was like coming from a home where your parents are divorced and you're dealing with a single mom and you're being raised by your grandparents. I have a similar story of that as well. However, when you're growing up in the church as a queer kid, especially if you're assigned male at birth, because this is my experience as a trans woman, when you show effeminate qualities, you are talked at, degraded, and made to feel less than as a child. Not only that, keep in mind that because of your perceived sexuality in your childhood, you don't really understand the confounds or you don't understand the ideologies concerning sexuality because you have not yet experienced that, but yet you are being sexualized because of your perceived sexuality, even as a youth. And I can imagine that was a trauma for Bishop McQueen. And I listened to him as he talked about trauma and going further into how once he got into the affirming ministry, he experienced a lot of the advances from people for group sessions, for people to come in as a third, or him to hook up with them from all genders. And he brought that up as a way to talk about hypersexuality and focusing it only on the LGBT community, in which that is the issue at hand. The LGBT is only looked at in terms of their sexuality. And so he words his paragraph about hypersexuality in a way to where he's saying because we are LGBT or queer or gay, that we are hypersexual as a result, not taking into account that when you study that, hypersexuality is linked to trauma. And I'm a living witness to that because I had to work through this. When you experience trauma, sometimes you may use sex and express your sexuality in a way that may not be healthy. You may go overboard with it and use that as a substitute for talking to someone or a substitute to really get the help that you need. And that's when it becomes a problem when it consumes your life in a way to where it affects everything else in the relationships around you. Now, since we understand that it is about trauma, I want to call attention call attention to something else. He did advise that he has a degree in psychology. So, him speaking these points about hypersexuality and having a degree in psychology is also making me wonder what else is going on behind the scenes and what was going on behind the scenes in his ministry leading up to this podcast. I'm wondering as he started working through this theology, what was his members' experiences? Were Now that they had affirmed themselves, were they talked down to or degraded? Were they possibly manipulated um, by his rhetoric to effect change if they wanted to stay in position at that ministry or stay in ministry? These are questions. And hearing how he weaponizes hypersexuality and trauma against the LGBT community, he also weaponizes that in an effort to boast the ministry of the family. He talks about how, again, he didn't grow up in the traditional family unit, but he goes on to say how, after deciding to part ways with the affirming movement and not necessarily become ex gay, and I'm going to touch on that in a minute when it comes to Dr. Horn's interview, he didn't say ex gay in the video, that was just in the title, but he did repeatedly say he was not attracted to men, right? So he goes on to say that because of that trauma that he's experienced in childhood, not necessarily sexual trauma, but it made him want to focus on the ministry of the family because he was tired of seeing broken families in so many words. But and he goes on to talk about emphasis on the role of the father. And while he's talking about the role of the father, he also talks about the role of the mother to nurture. And it's really given the ideal that the father is to lead while the woman submits, take care of the house and children. She just adds support and complements what the father says. But what about the people that don't have that? What about the people that don't desire that? What about other cultures that have other ways of having a family unit? Did you account for that, man of God? Because if you are as learned as you said you are, your rhetoric wouldn't be this way, you know? And I understand that trauma from not having that family dynamic can make you hyper focus on what you don't have. And sometimes it could give you that drive to go obtain it by any means necessary. But you can still have a family and be a gay man. And I also wonder what his spouse's experience was with him during this time. He didn't really go too much into his divorce, but he talked about how they displayed a perfect monogamous relationship in marriage. And he felt like it was all a lie. And I'm questioning what about it was a lie when you fought to get out of the traditional church and you fought your way out of that harmful mindset and then you accepted yourself and affirmed you got married to a man. Now all of a sudden it's a lie. What changed? What was it, the demise of your relationship, or could it be that there were certain desires that may have been expressed, but because you still hadn't really dealt with why you felt the way you did about relationships and monogamy and non-monogamy and possible other styles of loving people, was that too much for you? Or was it just because while you're doing this, you felt like you had to distance yourself? And I can only imagine the anguish that his spouse went through. And I understand grieving a marriage is a process and it affects people differently. But for me in this podcast, I didn't see any kind of grief from Bishop Keith McQueen. All I saw in both the interview with him and Dr. Will Horn, and on the We Need to Talk podcast, all I saw was someone who was ready to boast about, I'm not gay no more. I still am attracted to men, but I'm going to discipline myself and repress myself. But I'm bold to say I'm suffering in order to gain something in Christ. And I have a problem with that Christian theology that you have to suffer, you have to punish yourself, and you go through suffering by other people and other things for the glory of God when you're denying systems in place for systemic oppression. You're denying that certain harmful rhetoric can embed certain ideas, and also you're not holding indoctrination accountable. And I'm going to say, why come out of Egypt land and you want to go back when there's nothing in Egypt for you? For real. Like, come on. And he even goes so far to say that the church world is a female sport. And as it relates to when it's a common ideal that because there are mostly women in the church, that any man that is his church is going to turn out gay or feminine. But I have cousins that grew up in the same church around the same women that I grew up with in my family and in the church, outside of the church. None of them are gay or trans. They are cishet and straight. I'm the only one that was gay, queer, trans in the family. So that logic does not work. Not only that, there are plenty straight men in the church that serve that are not gay. And sir, you forget that the church is still patriarchal because most of the leadership in the black church is male. And we see the subjugation of women daily in the church. They're told how to dress, they're told when they can and cannot speak. In a lot of reformations, which you and I both came from, Bishop McQueen, women could not speak, lead, or preach or pastor. We still have reformations like that. And here you are speaking this rhetoric in an attempt to blame the single mother and women as to why you were gay. That's the same thing as when black men blame single mothers for why they hate women. Instead of the fact that you took an example from your father and you're still holding on to that trauma, and instead of dealing with that, you're projecting that onto other people with that degree in psychology. Everything that you're saying is going out of the window, because right now it's looking like you're speaking this rhetoric because now you saw that the affirming church wasn't bringing the acclaim and money that you bought, but now you are kissing up to some conservative preacher or some conservative group, and you're doing this, you're repressing yourself for the almighty dollar, and this is what is giving. And going furthermore in his rhetoric, I was listening to some of the words he was saying, he was talking about intentions and intentionality. Now, in the church world, we don't often use intention or intentionality. We'll use purpose or my mandate, or it's another word, my mantle or my reason. We don't say intention or intentionality. And it's given to me that had, he might have dabbled in some Black spirituality. And because of his whole religiosity, he turned away from that. And now he's demonizing that, but also demonizing other people that practice ancestral veneration. And I bet you either doesn't know what it is or knows what it is, but chooses to still be anti-Black in his rhetoric. And this follows along the trend that we've seen with many of Black leaders in preaching conservative points, demonizing people that listen to Beyonce, Tiffany Montgomery, listening to people like Jackie Hill Perry say that God will burn you up when you sin because he loves you so much, or even people that speak rhetoric concerning people just walking in their Blackness, walking in and practicing ATR. How can you demonize a culture that brought us through slavery, that we had to ingratiate and tailor so that massa wouldn't punish us or hurt us? How are you going to demonize something that brought us over and is still bringing us over as a people, and is still bringing your behind over? It's still bringing your ass over. Can we get a clue here? And to hear this, it hurts because you were championing for Black people and for Black queer community, but now you hate what you once were. You still haven't dealt with the parts of you that you don't like, but also there's insecurity there when it comes to meeting other LGBT people that may be a little bit freer than you. And it may have intimidated him. It may have intimidated to him to where, let me go ahead and just say I'm conservative because this ain't for me. But that's not the way to do that, honey. That's not the way to do that. And even as he continued in, I really feel like in the We Need to Talk About It podcast, he really, again, came over there to give a complicated testimony laced with scripture that was misused, because he did totally misteach the Jesus when he was tempted by Satan. He was saying that Jesus was fighting for his identity and fighting. No, 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 no. Jesus was affirming, which you're not. He affirmed his identity to Satan and reminded Satan of the word and reminded Satan of his authority. Which is what you were actually teaching people to do, but now you've changed the theology. And I like the words that overseer Ramel Parks Weekling, if I have the title on, Lord forgive me. He says something quick. This is the theological abuse, and I like the way that was worded. That is theological abuse, because when you switch up a doctrine and use it to justify your point and to further put a nail in the coffin for those people that you once were a part of, sir, that is harmful and manipulative. And I'm concerned with him having a degree in psychology, because when you have a degree in psychology, you learn how um, psychological processes work behind people. You learn how the brain works, how the mind works, how people think, different things like that. And also, you understand how people can be manipulative and some of the things that may cause them to be manipulative. And for me, him having a degree in psychology is a red flag for me, because not everybody uses that wisely. Some people will obtain degrees dealing with mental health so that they can upsert trauma on people because they are unhealed. They found a way to kind of manipulate people, control people in a way, and to have people be able to come to them because they may not have had that. But if that is the case with him, that is pretty fucked up of him to do. That is pretty fucked up. This whole situation is fucked up in the first place, because it's given manipulation, it's giving grift, and it's given that you don't give a fuck about the people. Because even as I looked at his persona, between the two podcasts, he had a lot of energy for the message. But then when he got with Dr. Will Horn, someone he was familiar with, someone that he has had experience with at Dr. Horn's words, um, and even hearing the apostle that I listened to talk about his experience, um, sir, you are playing a dangerous game because you're playing with people's minds, spirits, and emotions and their self worth. And it's given that you went into this ministry to see how far you could get with people, because in the We Need to Talk podcast, he did talk about how he first met some affirming ministers, and he decided to play devil's advocate towards the anti-gay crowd, and he saw how they didn't really want to talk, but the pro-LGBT people were willing to talk. And he said he decided to play devil's advocate, and that's one of the ways he got into the affirming ministry. And I'm like, number one, if you could play devil's advocate and get swept by your words into the affirming ministry, but also you were able to dress up that you're not gay so well while you preach fire and brimstone, then now you're admitting that you're dressing up again the fact that you're still attracted to men, but you're dressing it up by saying you're not going to act in it, you're going to be disciplined. Sir, that is not deliverance. That's you repressing yourself and further causing harm to yourself and further causing harm to the people that trusted you with their lives, that trusted you with their souls, that trusted you within their walk with God. And now by you doing this all of a sudden, not having a proper conversation, you have just torn down the building. You have torn down the foundation. You have completely uprooted this people. And now these people have to grieve. And now they are confused. They don't know which way to turn. And my heart really goes out to them. And I'm hoping and praying that those affected by him that you all are finding the love and care that you need. And I will advise that Bishop McQueen needs to step completely away from ministry and do some internal work and seek the help of a licensed professional to really help him, because I'm seeing traits of a few leaders that I've been under. I'm seeing traits of narcissism. I'm seeing toxicity all across the board, because I went through that with Pastor Stevenson and going into when I first moved to DC, and ending my time ending in ministry in 2021 with him. How I'm in the middle of my transition. You have someone who just came out. You have openly gay people that you are dealing with. People are married to their spouses, and you're wanting to deal with a traditional church that has in their bylaws that they are against the LGBT community. Yet you say that this will be good for you to build the ministry. Yet will build autonomy, but you are ignoring the fact that we have reservations. When your leader does not take you, the member, into consideration and expect you to go along, that is spiritual and emotional abuse. And it's giving you got all the money that you could get out of these people. Now they are no good to you. You have to discard them. And that's the way a narcissist work. Once they are done with you, however long they deal with you, they discard you and act like they've never known you. And how dare he come up there and act like no one from the LGBT community tried to comfort him, that it was straight people that comforted him once he made the stand. No, 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 no. It wasn't that people didn't want to comfort you, but people were shocked, betrayed, and hurt at the way you're going about this, because it is wrong the way you're doing this. I'm just going to call a thing. And I'm not talking at him. I'm just saying in general, the way he did this was wrong. You don't just jump your happy ass on a damn podcast and say, I'm still attracted to men, but I don't believe in the affirming doctrine because it's sin. Then you go to refer to everything as darkness and as evil. Sir, were you evil when you were tearing up the men? When you were getting tore up by the men? When you was putting mics in your mouth? Were you evil when you were out there experimenting? Like, come on, sir. Were you feeling evil when you were enjoying it? You enjoyed it, but now you have a shame because you enjoyed it. And I'm wondering where all this came from in the last 10 plus years. How do you go from affirming yourself to now hating yourself? It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. And I hate to see this, I really do, because this does nothing for the LGBT community, especially in the climate we're in, when LGBT rights are being overturned and assaulted. every day by this administration. You have trans people that are being attacked left and right. You have people that are losing benefits, and this is the way you want to go. Now, in Dr. Wilhorn's interview, he did say we need to focus on being community, but sir, you can't even answer the question whether you're part of the LGBT community or not. So, sir, you are actually not demonstrating yourself as any part of community. You are showing that you are an ops to any part of the community. And unfortunately, you are so heavenly good that you are no earthly good. You're so heavenly bound that you're no earthly good. You're too salty. And just, and I'm going to speak directly. I really feel that again, he needs to step away from ministry altogether. He does not need to be in ministry. If you're going to play games like this, but I also wonder, is it possible that he may be getting ahead of a story or a headline that could be coming out because of something he's done during those 10 plus years while he was in the affirming movement? I'm appalled. Again, I'm hurt, not just for me, but I'm disappointed as well because I watched him in this interview and nothing about him seemed authentic. In either interview, nothing really seemed authentic. It seemed in Dr. Horn's interview, he skirted around the issues. And that is very unsettling. If you cannot give me a clear answer for your theology and sound reason why you're backing it up, I can't trust anything you say. And I don't really trust half of the anecdotes that he said in his testimony in the We Need to Talk podcast. It's given the same thing Orange Jade did, Orange Siren did with the eating the dogs, eating the cats bullshit. And I'm just wondering where he's going to be in the next few years. And I already know that platforms are going to change, circles are going to change, and we're going to see a complete metamorphosis. But I would not be surprised if there is a scandal where he gets caught with his pants down in a compromising position, demonizing the same thing he said he's no longer a part of. In my opinion, no, he's not a part of the LGBT community. Not in you speaking rhetoric like that. You are ops at this point. Family sound off.